Hello, 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 and welcome back to the Spontaneous Brilliance podcast. I am so happy that you were inspired to join me here today, and I'm happy that I was inspired to be here myself and sharing this sequence of thoughts, and it's all about inspiration. Could you tell from the way I started it? Yeah, I'm thinking I was leaving some pretty big breadcrumbs right there. Anyway, inspiration. Yeah, we're going to talk about inspiration today because I talk to you guys all the time about your unique creative genius, right? The subtitle of the book, Spontaneous Brilliance, is Unleash the Power of Your Unique Creative Genius, right? That functions on the premise that everybody has one, or you have genius flowing through you. It's not just one thought or one singular desire. It is a genius that you are bringing to the planet. And I talk to you all the time about this idea that everyone is a unique creative genius. Everyone has a passion and a purpose that they brought to the planet. I say there is no shortage of brilliance on this planet, just a reluctance to offer it and a resistance to accepting it, yada, 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 yada. But it's not just hyperbole, you guys. And the reluctance to offer it and the resistance to accepting it, that's coming from us about our own genius, about our own inspiration. We get these inspired thoughts and then we go, yeah, and we come up with all these reasons why we're not going to follow that inspiration. We're not going to do anything about it. Or maybe we don't even have to have an argument with ourselves and come up with a reason because we're just in the natural practice of ignoring our inspiration. But inspiration and imagination are our soul's communication tools with the us that we're showing up here as, with the egoic self, the character that we are here playing on the great stage of life. That player, that soul is communicating with us. It's like, the little controller things for playing a character in a video game. The communication, the buttons on the controller that soulful self is pushing, those are our inspiration and our imagination. That is how our soul brings us to the creative process in a conscious way, in a connected way. Because remember, we are creating 24/7, right? Everything we think, do, and say creates. We're creating constantly. We are moving energy around. We're creating constantly, but are we doing it consciously? This process is about becoming conscious creators. And so if we are going to consciously create, we have to notice our inspiration. We have these communications coming to us all the time from our soulful self, and our listening skills in our egoic beings are a little stinky. Our values are off. We don't value that inspiration, that idea, that desire to bring something forth into this, great stage of life. We don't place that as the highest possible value. We place a really high value on what other people are thinking, what other people are perceiving, what other people are doing. And we let others tell us what is valuable for us to experience or to do rather than listening to ourselves. So inspiration has to do with listening to ourselves. The word inspiration originates from the Latin word that I know what it looks like on the page. I think it is pronounced inspire. I don't know what it is, but that Latin word literally means to breathe into. The word inspiration comes from the meaning of breathing it in, taking it in. It's the act of being filled with divine inspiration. And our soulful self is a little slice of the divine. It is where our creativity comes from that breath, from that inspiration. That's where our profound ideas, our motivation, our creativity, our creative spark, the juice that gets us up off the couch and lets us put down the Cheetos. That is that inspiration. That is coming from our soulful self. So rather than just letting it be a thought that passes by, remember that every thought that you have is an offer into your own life, because everything is an offer. So those thoughts that you have, those inspired thoughts that you have, you know what would be cool? Or, wow, I just saw another way that could configure. Or, whoa, what if, right? Whenever you have those kinds of thoughts, those exciting things, those kinds of thoughts that made Ben Franklin, put the key on the kite string, those kinds of what if, I wonder, that's inspiration. And when I say that every single human being on this planet has a unique creative genius, we know it's not hyperbole. It's not just a philosophical point of view. It is, in my metaphorical, metaphysical universe, it is the fundamental truth of what we're doing here. We're here to bring this inspiration forth. It's like we're not here to facilitate other people's inspiration. We are here to commit to bringing forward what we are inspired by, what we can imagine. In video games, RP terms, right? We can just say, you're not a non-player character. You are the reason that this game that you are playing is activated. It's your purpose that is driving the story. It is your seeking of these obstacles, etc., this experience that is causing the story to even be happening. You're not a non-player character. Non-player characters in a video game, they are characters that are just a part of the game. They are there to put an oomph into the story, into the process, to help take the characters that are being played to their next level, or to provide some sort of impetus for the next stage of the story. But you cannot possibly be a non-player character in the story of your own creation, which is what this life that you are living is. So please don't act like it. Please don't abdicate your role to being that of a non-player character that is just here to facilitate somebody else's. Somebody else's powerful movement is not taking your story forward. Right? Another way of looking at this is this experience that we are having on the great stage of life. Each of us is having our own story from our own point of view. If you think of it in movie and play terms, right? It is our film, our play from our point of view. And this story is as brilliant and as beautiful and as wild and as wonderful and as multifaceted as our inspiration will allow it to be for us. This story that we are in is happening for us, for each of us. So think of it as a billion stories, a billion games, a billion movies, a billion plays, whatever metaphor you would like to jump into right here. These billions of stories, this multifaceted universe is happening all simultaneously. Each of us is experiencing our own story within the global stage. There are as many movies, as many plays, as many points of view as there are humans. And any playwright, any author, any screenwriter, any story writer in any medium, for our purposes, the playwright, right? A playwright doesn't just throw in random pointless characters just to have them there. And the lead is the person whose point of view is telling the story. So they certainly don't tell the story from the point of view of a character that is not the lead. So when I teach playwriting, I often have to unteach some simplified perspectives on the protagonist and antagonist that we got from grade school. We are taught in grade school that the protagonist is the good guy and the antagonist is the bad guy. But in reality, in storytelling of any kind, but particularly in playwriting, and we are all the playwright of our own story here on the great stage of life, the protagonist is the person whose wants and desires, whose wants and needs move the story forward. That's who the protagonist is. The antagonist is anybody that's in the way of that, whose wants and needs conflict with that, block that, or try to block that. Okay? So the protagonist is the character whose wants and needs drive the plot of the play. Hello, that's the description of your life. Your wants and needs, your inspiration, your ideas, your unique creative genius, and whether or not you choose to offer it as opposed to block it, that is what drives your story. So remember that when a playwright is developing a plot, that lead character, that protagonist, they are critical, central to the story from the point of view of that character, right? They are the center of the universe. That does not mean that that character is consequential in a worldview, in the given circumstances that the play is taking place in. It doesn't mean that in order for you to consider yourself the protagonist of this story that you're living, you do not have to have high status in the circumstance, in the world which you are within from a societal perspective. In other words, you don't have to be rich. You don't have to be famous. You don't have to be the smartest person in the world. You don't have to be anything except what you are to be the protagonist of this story. But you do have to own it. You do have to accept that 100% responsibility for moving the story forward, because you are in complete 100% ability to respond, to write this story. You are the playwright. This story will go how you choose to have it go. The time-space reality that we are in, this great stage of life at this moment, it's just a framework for the experience. We came here on purpose to play the lead in the particular story that we are writing within the context of and sort of interconnected to billions of other stories that are being written simultaneously from different points of view. But we are not here for the purpose of just acquiescing to or giving into whatever this story is that is washing over us. We are here because we have an intention. We had an intention as we incarnated into this multifaceted universe. We had an intention to experience things. We wanted to experience. Our soulful selves are experiencing through these characters. So when we notice those spontaneous thoughts that are coming to us, our spontaneous brilliance is those inspired thoughts that touch down, that help us understand what we intended to feel and affect and be and do and have and share, and how we are intending to create this world. Inspiration is only as valuable as you make it. You have to honor it. You have to treat it with a reverence. You have to breathe it in, right? Take it in, breathe it in. And then when the imagination clicks in with that, then that inspiration that comes from the soulful self, that comes from source, can grow into action that we take that moves us forward. The inspiration comes from that expanded knowing. It comes from a place of knowing that everything's okay, that we are not bound by anything except what we accept that we are bound by. When we are spiritual beings having a human experience, when our egoic self gets a hold of that inspiration, it will oftentimes want to protect us from it because its job is to be the protective personality, right? To kind of try to keep us from pain, or at least that's what it thinks its job is. So this physical manifestation that we're here as gets kind of a life experience amnesia. So we aren't necessarily acknowledging in every moment, in every second, especially in the scary ones, that we are fine. Everything is fine. We are a spiritual being, that spiritual being is a part of source. It is a part of pure consciousness. It knows everything is okay. And it also knows what the intention was that we came here to experience. And so when we get that inspiration, we need to lean into it. Because when the protective personality, God bless it, is protecting us from something, from anything that might be painful or might be icky or might be awful, that is not the perspective of our soul. That is not the perspective of the soul. In fact, the soul came here in this physical body to experience hard and weird and strange, and experience the effort that it takes to transcend that, to accept it, to embrace that obstacle, and then grow through it. This expression is not bound by the fear. That's our egoic self blocking. Whatever our bus stop conversation was that got us here, that's what we want to be sort of measuring our inspiration and how much we want to lean into it from, is what is our bus stop conversation? Now, I know that in these podcasts, I don't think I've ever mentioned the bus stop conversation. That is a metaphor that comes from someone else who I know I have mentioned before. Where I get the term, where I originally heard the term protective personality, was from Dr. Sue Morter, who's the author of The Energy Codes. And if you haven't heard anything about Dr. Sue, I highly recommend going to her website or her YouTube channel or whatever. She's got tons of free stuff out there, but she also has a terrific book called The Energy Codes. And she has a different way of expressing these same thoughts. But one of her metaphors that I just love, because you know I love a metaphor, but one of her metaphors is the bus stop conversation. And when she talks about the bus stop conversation, it is this. Bus stop conversation is, you're so excited and you're on the astral plane and you're in your full expansion as your soulful self, but you're really excited because you're going to incarnate and you're going to come down to earth and you're going to have a lifetime. And so you get to the bus stop that's headed for earth and there's all these other souls there and you're like just overflowing with this excitement and you're going, I'm so excited. I get to go to earth and I get to learn about, I'm going to go learn about forgiveness, and I'm going to go learn about what it takes to transcend what seems like an immeasurable obstacle, and I'm going to learn how to respect my inner knowing, and I'm going to learn all this stuff, and it's going to look like really crazy, like that's impossible to do, and I get to go try to do it. And then you turn to everybody at the bus stop and you go, so in order to do that, I got to have somebody treat me really, really icky when I'm 8. And then I need this terrible thing to happen to me when I'm 15. And then I need this challenge to come into my life when I'm 18. And then I was thinking, I really, really need to run into this at about 25. And I would love for this to be a huge obstacle in my life and this to happen. And raise your hand if you want to be those people for me. And then those people at the bus stop go, well, okay, sure, I'll do it. I'll do it. I'll do it for you. I'll do it for you. And that's your bus stop conversation. Dr. Sue probably describes it a lot more effectively, but you get the general idea, right? So the idea is, from Dr. Sue's metaphorical perspective, is when you encounter something or someone in your life that is presenting a seemingly tragic or insurmountable or painful or fearful experience to you, you have to ask yourself, what was my bus stop conversation with this person? Your bus stop conversation is critical to understanding what it is that placed you through your own intention, what it is that placed you into the challenging circumstances. What are the misunderstandings and misalignments and the tough stuff and the contrast that we put ourselves into on purpose, intentionally? We don't want the protective personality to be in overdrive, to be holding us back from our inspiration because it is trying to keep us from feeling any pain. If we don't feel pain, we're not going to feel joy either. If we aren't working our way through obstacles, we're not growing. If we don't have the pain, we're not going to notice our mistakes. If we don't have the discomfort, if we don't have the frustration, if we don't have those issues come up, we're not going to notice our misunderstandings. We're not going to notice when we are out of alignment with our soulful self, when we are out of alignment with what we intended to do, what we came joyfully running to that bus stop with in our intention. What did we come here to do? We can't notice that if we don't lean into those inspired ideas, no matter what the obstacles seem to be. That bus stop conversation is another way of talking about your sacred friend. You know, what the Dalai Lama calls your sacred friend. Who is that person that is here that their behaviors are so egregious? They're so out of alignment with what you think ought to be loving, compassionate behavior, that you have to grow in order to be able to be here in that grace-filled existence with them. So whether the metaphor we're using for the framework is the great stage of life or the bus stop conversation or whatever the metaphors, they are just frameworks that we can use for understanding that this relationship between our soulful self and our egoic self, between the player and the character, that relationship is critical. And relationships rely on communication, right? And the only way that we receive communication from our soulful self when we are here in this body as this person we perceive as being us, the only way that we receive that communication in this process is through our inspiration, our imagination, and our intuition. And they're all really one thing. There are not certain people that are more intuitive than other people. There are certain people that have figured out how to hear it, that have figured out how to see it, that have figured out, or maybe they intended when they ran up to the bus stop, they already knew they were going to come here without the amnesia about the intuitive piece, without the full amnesia about the connection. That's all intuition is. So when we honor inspiration, we need to honor the inspiration that is coming from within. The first thing that we do is we block it because we think we're not good enough for the inspiration. What if I can't do it? What if nobody likes it? What if? It's not really that we're challenging the inspiration. It's that we're challenging our worthiness to be the one who brings the inspiration forward. That's one of the first ways that we block inspiration. It's not that we're going, that's a dumb idea. It's that we're going, I don't know if I'm good enough for that idea. If you have the idea and you will allow for the fact that when that inspiration comes, when that desire comes, when that thought comes that is your spontaneous, brilliant thought, it is coming from your soulful self. When you can accept that, then there is no way you're not good enough. So rather than shut it down, explore it, play with it, let your imagination have a minute with it and see if it feels right. Because remember that when you feel good, you are in alignment with your soulful self. When you feel grace and beauty and joy and love, you're in alignment with your soulful self. You're on point with your inspiration. You are connected. That is an intuitive response. When you are just in joy and you're just happy for no reason, then you are in alignment with your soulful self. When you are frustrated, when you are in fear, when you are in doubt, when you are in all of those states, then you are out of alignment. What your soulful self is intending and what you are doing, two different things. The way you are seeing the world, the way you are believing your role is in this play on the great stage of life at that moment, your perspective is out of alignment with the perspective of your soulful self. That's how you feel fear and frustration and all of those things, okay? So, number one, don't block that inspiration by believing that you're not good enough for the inspiration. The other way that we block inspiration, our inspiration, is that we over-accept the vehicle of the inspiration. And this won't sound like blocking when I first describe it to you, but it is a form of blocking. So we get very, 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 very enamored with those humans that inspire us. When we see somebody else out there doing something, it inspires us and it gives us energy, and they maybe become our coach, or they become our guru, or they become the book that we just can't put down. They become sort of the rule book by which we lead our lives. Whether they're a political figure or an inspirational thought leader, or they are a spiritual leader, whoever they are, we get enamored with that person. And we start to think that the person is the important thing. If it's a scientist who discovered something, and I'm not saying we should not acknowledge the beauty or the impact or the profundity of something when someone brings it onto the planet and shares it with the rest of us. A scientific discovery or a medical thing or a beautiful painting or a glorious novel or a self-help perspective or a whatever that is. I'm not saying that we should not acknowledge the person that brought it onto the planet. Of course we should. And we should be more than happy to see what else they've got to offer. But when we get focused on that, on just sort of having reverence for the human rather than reverence for their idea, then we miss the point. We miss the point that once it is an offer, then it gets to be yes-anded by everybody else on the planet. If you just let that offer be there and you over-accept it, like, okay, that's the answer. Okay, I'm done. I'm just going to live by what they said. I'm just going to follow this rule. I'm just going to stay right here because there's no more to add to that, right? Because it sounds silly in that regard when we say, okay, somebody else has an idea, they have an inspiration, and they commit to it, and they see it through the creative process that they develop on their own, and they find that they bring that to fruition. Their creativity gets applied, and they bring it to fruition, and they offer it to the rest of the world, and we accept it. That is not where the process ends. Remember, it's yes and. It's always about the and. It's always about you say, I accept that, I see that, and this is how I'm going to respond to it. This is what I'm going to offer back into it. When we get too enamored with somebody who writes the novel and inspires us and makes us, transcend the way that we see the world, makes us transform and move to another place in our understanding of ourselves and the world. And we just think, wow, that is, or it's a great escape, right? And we just think, wow, that novel is the coolest thing ever. We can be in gratitude that person brought it onto the planet. And certainly they're going to get a reward of, a bunch of people buying their book. But the person is not the offer. Okay. And when we get stuck on just accepting them, and we think because we liked this thing they said, we have to accept all the other things that they say as equally inspirational and equally in alignment with us. And it doesn't work that way. Just as you are a myriad of thoughts and intuitions and imaginings and inspirations and you have a myriad of offers that you put out into the world, so does everybody else. And all we're looking for in those 60,000 thoughts a day is one brilliant thought a day. Don't assume that anybody else's thoughts are all brilliant, all an offer that you have to over-accept into your life. Over-accepting somebody else as the vehicle for the offer, making them the only thing that you're focused on, that is a form of blocking. And over-accepting yourself as the offer, getting too enamored with how people are responding to your offer, giving too much importance to you, is another form of blocking. A long time ago, many years ago, when I was running New Heritage Theater Company, and even before that, I started doing this, I would write these programs that we called the response program. And they were half structured, half improvisational programs that toured throughout schools for like 11 years in several different states. And they dealt with really tough circumstances and got kids talking about really, really difficult circumstances. Suicide, date rape, AIDS, relationship abuse, drunk driving, different, whatever the things were that were on the cutting edge of what was challenging kids in that moment in the school systems, that's what we would lean right into that. And so we have stacks. We literally have a study that is over an inch thick that is filled with responses and reactions to the programs, letters from kids that would say that we literally saved their life because they felt so alone until they participated in that project. And then they realized that they weren't going to kill themselves, that they weren't alone, that they could get help, that whatever. And those people, it changed their life. They don't know me. They don't know that I wrote and directed those shows. My name was nowhere on anything that they experienced in that. And that's because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that it was an inspiration that came to me, that then I was inspired to create the project. It was a series of inspirations. And it took offering and accepting with a lot of people, obviously, over a lot of states, right? And then it took those people in the audience that experienced that interactive production, it took them accepting the offer. It's what they did with it. It wasn't about me. Same thing, if somebody clear across the world could read Spontaneous Brilliance and do something with it and allow it to transform their life, and in that same block somewhere on the other side of the planet, that same city block, somebody else could read it and get, 3 paragraphs into it and set it down and never pick it up again. It is the same offer that I made, and it can have the effect that they allow it to have. But nowhere will it help them to make me the focus of that accepting. They can accept my offer. And there's a lot of offers in Spontaneous Brilliance in the book. It's a book full of offers, right? And you don't have to take them all. Nobody has to take me word for word. Nobody has to take me at all in order to somehow be inspired by my offer and then do something with it in their life. Because remember, our intuition, our imagination, and most importantly, our inspiration, because that's the moment that it floods into our system. Those are our soul's communication tools. And only when we rely on our egoic self's perspective of the value of that inspiration is when we block that inspiration. Remember that your inspiration is as beautiful and as bold and as profound as you allow it to be. Your unique creative genius is. It is a thing. You have a unique creative genius that you are bringing to the world. You have a unique way of looking at the world. You have a unique inspiration that comes to you. You have a unique circumstance that you're receiving that inspiration within. And so the context from which you respond is going to be unique unto you. It's not a question of whether or not you have genius. It's not a question of whether or not you have inspiration. It's just a question of whether or not you honor it and you offer it. Because remember, there is no shortage of brilliance on this planet. There is no shortage of brilliance within you. There is only a reluctance to offer it and a resistance to accepting it. That's our only problem, folks. We have all the answers that we need planetarily for everything, and the inspiration comes to each of us for our own little pieces of it. But we cannot solve the problems that we have on this planet. We cannot transcend those obstacles if we don't accept the inspiration being offered by our soulful selves. Each of us has a role to play, and we are each the lead in our own production. So pretty please, play the lead in your own story. Take center stage. Let your inspiration guide you. And let's get busy making this and every day a beautiful, glorious, blessing-filled day. Thanks so much for being here again with me to play in this infinite field of inspiration called the Spontaneous Brilliance Podcast. All right, my friends, have a beautiful, glorious, blessing-filled day and go out there and offer that same thing to everybody else. I will talk to you soon. Bye. The Spontaneous Brilliance Podcast is brought to you by Miracle Communications Group. Our producer is Michelle Oneida. Sound engineer is Corey Michaels at Corey Michaels Productions. Music is composed by Rex Miller. And I'm your host, Sandra Kavanaugh. You can learn more about me and all things Spontaneous Brilliance at sandrakavanaugh.com or spontaneousbrilliance.com. And please join the conversation here at the Spontaneous Brilliance Podcast by emailing us at podcast@spontaneousbrilliance.com.